Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hey guys, it's Leslie with the She Reads Romance Books podcast, your place to find the best romance books worth reading because life is better with a love story. So for today's episode, you're in luck because I am sharing my entire April 2025 reading list. I love to share sort of mini reviews of all the books that I read each month so that you know which books you absolutely have to read because I love them so much. They deserve a spot on your TBR list. Or perhaps I share some books that didn't quite hit the mark, so I suggest you kind of skip those or maybe just pick them up from the library if they still might be of interest to you. So today I'm going to do kind of like speed dating with romance books. I'm going to just talk quickly about some of these books, see if maybe this is a fun way to share my reading list each month. So to start it all off, I'm going to say that I am totally in my cowboy romance book era. I don't know what it is. I mean, I love all romance heroes. I mean, let's be real. I love the alpha males. I love the cinnamon rolls. I love the athletes. But right now, give me a cowboy or a rancher, and I am a happy woman. And I definitely read my fill, or at least started to get my fill of cowboy romance books this past month. And the first book that I read was Cash by Jessica Peterson. This was my first book by Jessica, and oh my gosh, totally blown away by this woman's writing. This is an enemies to lovers romance between Cash and Molly. So the quick and dirty is that Molly is about to go to the reading of the will. Her father, who she was estranged from, just passed away, and she assumes that she's going to inherit his Texas ranch, which she wants to turn around and sell so she has capital for her boot making business, which is pretty cool. And then the rancher or head foreman of the ranch, who's been there for a while, Cash, is there as well, assuming that he might also have a stake in the ranch. And long story short, turns out Molly does inherit it. Cash is not super happy about that, but there's a caveat that she has to live on the ranch for a year before she can sell it or do anything with it. So sets up a really good, like I said, enemies to lovers, but forced proximity romance that was fire, you guys. Seriously, I loved the banter of this book. I loved Cash, this alpha cowboy who was so super hot. Molly in her sort of struggles, but a woman who has her own business. It was fantastic. And as soon as I ended reading Cash, I had to immediately read Wyatt, which is book 2, because this whole series is available on Kindle Unlimited, which I loved because I could just totally go and binge read one after the other. Now, Wyatt is Cash's brother. This whole Lucky River Ranch series is based on 5 brothers. Wyatt is the second brother, and his story is a childhood friends to lovers romance. The heroine is Sally. So their story, gosh, super sweet, but also kind of super hot because it turns into sort of a fake dating, teach me, bedroom, ways in the bedroom kind of book, which I love those. Wyatt is the brother who and Sally were friends as they were younger, but Sally's dad is a veterinarian. She wanted to become a veterinarian, so she went off to college and then vet school. Only came back periodically, even though both of them secretly love the other and have never said it. So finally, she's back for a set period of time before she's supposed to take this really prestigious surgical job in New York. But she realizes she hasn't had any fun in her life and she doesn't really know what to do in the bedroom. And so she reaches out to Wyatt for some help and shenanigans ensue. And it was just awesome. I really loved this. Another great one in the series. Highly recommend. So then after book 2, I had to, of course, dive into book 3, which was Sawyer, another brother in the mix. But Sawyer is a single dad. He has a little girl who is about, I can't remember, she's 3 or 4. And so this is a single parent romance because he ends up having a one night stand with Ava, who is another single parent. These two like just realize they never get out and have fun. They connect at this honky tonk and end up having this really hot, really long, and really fun like one night stand, assuming they will never run into each other again. Except they do when Ava takes on a job of, what do you call it, coaching barrel racing at the nearby ranch where Sawyer is, and they run into each other and their girls become best friends. And oh my gosh, super adorable and really great look at single parenthood, also what it means to be in a partnership in a relationship. And I'm super excited that I love this book because I'm going to announce it here. Sawyer by Jessica Peterson is going to be our May 2025 book of the month for the She Reads Romance Books Book Club. And I'm so excited for it. We are going to talk all about Sawyer and Ava's love story in book club and with Jessica during the author Q&A. But we'll probably talk about all of her hunky cowboys as well as probably the 2 still to come in the series. It's awesome. I will say, though, if you're new to this series and you want to join us in book club and meet with Jessica, Sawyer can absolutely be read as a standalone. I'm really not just saying that. I think for Wyatt, you maybe want to read Cash first, but I think for Sawyer, again, you can read it on its own. But I loved Cash and Wyatt, so I would just quickly binge read them in Kindle Unlimited, then read Sawyer, and then join us in book club at the end of May. Okay, on to more cowboys later this month, but I'm going to switch to an audiobook that I listened to in April, which is actually kind of like a reread for me, which was The Finish Line by Kate Stewart. And if you are a Kate Stewart fan like I am and you have devoured her Ravenhood series, then you know how awesome The Finish Line is. Like, I loved the Ravenhood series, especially this book, which honestly was only supposed to be like an extended epilogue. But she decided, no, I have more to say about Tobias. And so she made it into this 3rd book. And it was really great to get his history and his thoughts and point of view from this whole timeline that began with Flock and Exodus. I wasn't quite sure about the narrator for Tobias, and oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name. Oh, anyway. But he does like a French accent, which at first I'm like, but it did kind of grow on me. And there were some scenes, like particularly one where Tobias sort of breaks down and he like knocked it out of the park. Like I was bawling my eyes out, even though I already knew it was coming. But, and again, even knowing what was coming in the story and having reread it, I really just sunk into this audiobook and loved, Tobias and Cecilia's second chance story and the conclusion to sort of their piece to this. But excited to see what's ahead in the Ravenhood spinoff with Tyler's book that is going to come out, I think, in June this year. I'm going to be meeting Kate at a signing for that book, and I'm super excited for it. Next up was a book that absolutely is going to be on my best of 2025 list, and that is Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone. Oh my gosh, you guys, this was my first read by Cara, which is, I'm sort of ashamed to admit, because I now have to read all of her books because this one totally blew me away. It is Lenny and Miles' story, which heavily focused on grief, but it was sort of also a forced proximity romance. Lenny lost her best friend, who's honestly like a sister to her, and she's really, really struggling with her grief. Miles, has familiarity with that and knows how she's feeling and can recognize that in her, and just is this presence for her to really help her through her grief. With the guise of that, Lenny will help him sort of become closer to his sister and his niece, who Lenny is watching for the next couple of weeks. I can't say more without spoiling it, and you really should be okay with grief before reading it, but, oh my gosh, the writing was phenomenal. I mean, she must have, I don't know, I would hate to say it, like, experience with grief herself, but I just felt like she was phenomenal in how she portrayed it and just how their slow burn love story developed over the pages. Definitely one not to miss this year. Promise Me Sunshine. Loved it. My next book in April to read was my advanced reader copy of Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, the big release of this month. And I kind of had so many thoughts about this book. At first, it's starting out, I loved it. And then I wasn't sure. And at the end, I was like, not really sure what to think of this book. I've been like kind of hit or miss with Emily Henry. I think her writing is phenomenal, but I've been hit or miss with just sort of the storylines, I guess sometimes. People We Meet on Vacation is absolutely my favorite book by her, and it still is my favorite. I just love so much everything about that book, honestly. And I knew going into this one that this was going to be kind of different. And I would say it is sort of more women's fiction with sort of a side taste of romance, where Alice and Hayden are these two rival writers. They're rivals because they're both propositioned by Margaret, this like 80-something-year-old woman from a very famous old family in the US, and she is now decided she wants to write her family memoir, and she can't decide if it's going to be Alice to write it or Hayden. And so you get a big portion of Margaret's family's story, which is sort of more the women's fiction part of it, right? And it's why a lot of people are drawing parallels to Taylor Jenkins Reid's book, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I have not read that book, so I can't really speak to that. But at first, I was really pulled into Margaret's family's story. I thought it was really cool, but I mean, you start with like great-great-grandparents, I think, if I remember. And I love how you sort of learn bits and pieces about her family. But I will say towards the end, I kind of got a little like, okay, enough already. Like, let's move this along of this family, because it just became so many, I don't know, names and things. And anyway, but there's sort of this mystery that becomes involved. And then you also see Alice and Hayden, who are knowing that they're competing, but they're also sort of meeting together and falling in love. But to me, I felt like that romance seemed a little far-fetched just because they really didn't have a lot of time together. But okay, sorry, I'm like rambling about this now. Overall, I thought a very well-written book. It was enjoyable. I just thought the family story went a little long and the romance didn't quite hit the mark, or at least be my favorite, but I am glad I read it. Just wasn't my favorite Emily Henry book. The next book, definitely another one on my best of 2025 romance book reading list, and that is It's a Love Story by Annabelle Moynihan. This comes out later this month. I read my advanced reader copy, and I've been like singing its praises on Instagram, and I have an interview with Annabelle coming out later this month as well during release week, where I just like fangirled on her the whole time because this book was just beautiful. It's Jane and Dan's love story, kind of an enemies to lovers, if you will, because Jane is so pissed at Dan. Jane is a former child star, and she's now trying to get a movie produced and sort of make a name for herself as an adult. And the first one that she tried to have produced, Dan, who's a cinematographer, like totally trashed it, and so it never went anywhere. Now she has this new movie script that she is just in love with and really, 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 really wants to have it made. And then she sees that Dan's in the room and she's like, oh, great, he's going to like trash this one as well. But it turns out he's just as enamored with it too. However, it's not as big blockbustery as the studio is hoping for. So Jane opens her mouth and is like, wait, I have an idea. I know this, up and coming singer. What if I had him write a song for the movie? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And she's like, oh shit, like I haven't talked to him in years and I really don't want to talk to him for reasons you'll find out in the book. But he is going to be, so they live in LA, and the singer is going to be at this music festival on Long Island, and that's where Dan's family is. And he's like, hey, I have an inn to the music festival. Why don't you come stay with my family for a couple of days and let's make this happen? So then it's like this forced proximity becomes found family romance, which is just beautiful. I love Dan. He is now one of my favorite book boyfriends. And Jane is just this really strong, great heroine as well. I could go on and on about this book, but just tune into my interview with Annabelle where we will just gush about Jane and Dan and convince you to read it because it's awesome. 5 stars all around. From that awesome book, I dived into a fantasy romance, which is out early this month on May 6th, and that is Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. This is her first foray into fantasy romance and romantasy, and I think she did a fabulous job. It's the first book in this new series that is like a forced marriage romance. It's going to bring in lots of different monsters and have this thread of what is sort of happening in this land. You have the Guardian, this like super hunk with really cool abilities. And then you have Odessa, who is the daughter of the king, and she thought her sister was going to be the one who is what you call the sparrow and is going to be married off to the prince of this other kingdom. But it turns out Odessa is forced to marry Xavier, and she sails on the ship to his land, and that's when a lot of interesting things begin to happen. I kind of saw where the story was going, and I'm so glad I was right because it was awesome. So I can't really tell more about it, but I think the monsters are really cool. I think Odessa is just this really great, undermined strong heroine that you love in fantasy romance. And the male lead is really awesome too. So if you love fantasy, I would highly check out Shield of Sparrows. Okay, and then I went back to cowboy romance for some more books this month. The next one being Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. This was her last in her Rebel Blue series. Oh, so sad, but it is, or finally, Dusty and Cam's story, which I think you need to read at least the prior book, Lost and Lassoed, before you read this one. I just think it might enhance it if you know a little bit more about Cam before diving into this one. But this is their second chance romance story. I thought it was super sweet. You don't get a ton. I wish I got more understanding of why Dusty didn't act sooner, right? Because anyway, this book starts off with Cam is supposed to get married, and her fiance does not show up for the wedding, even though, I mean, that's a big embarrassment, but she didn't really love the guy, and you come to understand why she was going to marry him, even though Dusty is the love of her life. And Dusty was just going to let her get married. And you're like, what the heck, Dusty? So I wish I knew a little bit more about why he let things go so long. And same with Cam when they knew that their soulmate was that other person. But it really is a sweet second chance romance. As I said, with two people you knew were just destined for each other. And there's a part at the end, which I won't spoil, which I thought was just really cool and brought their story full circle. And I love the book cover of this book. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. The next cowboy romance books that I dived into, I started with the audiobook and then finished with the paperback because I was sent all the books in this series, so I can't wait to dive into them all. But this book is Alive in Wells by Bailey Hanna. And this is the first book in her Wells Ranch novel. It's a book that I typically probably wouldn't pick up because it has a storyline that I don't really love, which is domestic violence. So trigger warning about that piece. Cecily has an abusive husband, and she finally decides to leave him and has an out with a job at Wells Ranch. However, Austin Wells, who is the rancher, not a cowboy, he's prone to clarify, owns, but he doesn't really know Cecily's background. And he's like, what is this city girl doing at my ranch? But he then does sort of come to understand her history, especially because Cecily's ex is going to make an appearance. But it was a really great romance about her finding her footing and realizing that she deserves more. And more is in this really hot alpha cowboy who is all about taking care of her. So, Alive in Wells was really awesome. Cannot wait to dive into the rest of this series. I have book 2 lined up to read, which is a surprise pregnancy romance, and it's called Seeing Red. And then book 3 is going to come out later this month called Change of Heart. And then book 4 will be out later this fall. So if you love cowboy romance books like I do, this is a great series to dive into. 2 more books that I read this month. The next was my pick for the April 2025 Romance Book Reading Challenge, which was to read a historical romance. I do really love historicals. There's just something about like the different time periods and just how the characters interact with one another that I love so much. And I got an advanced reader copy of A Duke Never Tells by Susan Enoch, which I never feel like I say her name right. I apologize if I don't, but this sounded like a really cute romance where a young woman is sort of forced to or becomes betrothed to this son whose father had passed away and it now becomes the Duke, and his dad had promised her to this woman, and yet they are both sort of marrying the other sight unseen, and they're really not sure about the other. Meg Pinwell is the heroine. She's like, I've heard about James Clay's reputation. I don't know about this guy. And she enlists her aunt Clara's help to like kind of make a quick trip to their manor just to see if they can talk to the help about James Clay. And so Meg actually poses as Clara's like not lady's maid, but like, I don't know, kind of helper. And when they arrive, James Clay, who's like a reluctant duke, doesn't want to take over because the manor is falling into ruin. He has to make all these decisions. And sort of he introduces himself as the butler and says that his man of business, Rinikin, is actually the duke. And so Aunt Clara is sort of hanging out with Rinikin, the fake duke, and they end up falling for each other, unbeknownst their different, places in society, as well as James, the true duke, ends up falling for Meg. So that setup of the story is very cute. It was a little slow going for me, though. It just took a long time for I summed up the story, which took up most of half of the book, right? It was cute how each of them were falling in love, but it didn't like wow me like other Suzanne books have. But again, the story was a cute setup. So I'd say it was a 3-star read for me. If you like that sort of, oh my gosh, mistaken identities or hidden identity, then I think it's a cute one to read. Okay. And I'll say, so it's May. So our May 2025 Romance Book Reading Challenge is going to be fantasy romance. So I have a ton of fantasy romance book lists on She Reads Romance Books. So just go to the search bar and just type in fantasy romance and you're going to see a ton of lists to pick a recommendation, or you can email me, message me, and I will offer one up for you. My pick is going to be Julie Soto's upcoming fantasy, which doesn't release until July, but I have an advanced reader copy of Rose in Chains, and I'm super excited to dive into that. So that's going to be my pick for the May challenge. But my last book for April that I'm so excited to talk about is called Willing Prey by Ali Oleander. Berkeley Romance reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in this book? And as soon as I read the summary, I was like, heck yes, please send this to me. Because this is a book about primal play, which I'm like, totally, I don't know. I was just like, I need to know more about this. I had a hint of different scenes of primal play in Pen Pal by J.T. Geisinger, but the fact that this book is about Claire and Shane. So Claire recently got a divorce and from her lawyer ex-husband, and they had gotten into sort of primal play as their kink. But her douchey ex-husband had sort of talked about that at a Christmas party at work. And Shane is one of his colleagues, and he like overheard it, and he got really like intrigued by it and really just became somewhat obsessed with Claire. And so he sort of bided his time, and then had heard that she's in debt for student loans and she's a teacher and needs some money. And so he offers her $30,000 to become his prey for the summer. So she basically moves into his house and gets this watch where at any point she receives a text in a time, and that's basically her, like if he says 7, then she has a 7-minute lead before he starts chasing after her into the woods behind his house. And I mean, the hunts totally hit the mark. Like, I was so excited reading those, and the first one like kicks things off with a total bang, I have to say. But the book isn't just like hunt after hunt. Like, I have to give Allie some really great credit. Like, this book was really more than I thought it would be. I was so intrigued by Claire, definitely by Shane, because you learn more about his sort of interest and backstory. It was super hot and steamy, and I loved that. I think, what I love most about this book is that Claire isn't just this woman who's this like shy, inexperienced person who's like, oh my gosh, I have to do this for money. Let me try it out. No, this is like her kink, and she loves it and really gets into it. And I loved that about her. So, and if you can imagine like an alpha male, but yet who's also like this really sweetie. I mean, sometimes that seems like such a juxtaposition, but that's Shane, and it just worked perfectly in this book. So Willing Prey comes out, I think, October this year, but I highly recommend you pre-order it, put it on your TBR list if Primal Play is of interest to you. It was a super quick read and a really good one, so highly, highly recommend. And so that is my quick speed dating of all of my April reads. Maybe it wasn't as quick as I thought maybe it would be, but had some really, really great romance books that I read this month. A few that were okay. Nothing that was really a huge miss, which is always a plus in my book. So don't forget, Sawyer by Jessica Peterson is our May 2025 book of the month for the She Reads Romance Books Book Club. Cannot wait to talk about it with you in the club and with Jessica later this month. Don't forget, we're reading a fantasy romance for the Romance Book Reading Challenge. And if you need help where to keep track of all of these books to read on your TBR list, don't forget that you can grab the Romance Book Reading Challenge on shereadsromancebooks.com as a printable or on Amazon in paperback or hardcover. I loved creating this journal exclusively for romance book readers, where it is a reading planner, tracker, and journal all in one with ample TBR lists and places to track books by category and trope. So much goodness in this. If you're a romance book lover like me, then you need to grab it. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to give me a star rating and write a review on your way out. And then I will see you next time on the podcast. As always, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.